There's no doubt Watson he's a charming fellow. I know him fairly well. He's a very nice guy to chat with. We disagree. We are diametrically opposed in our philosophies of governance. What beats Watson is Watson. His approach to governance is not sustainable, and either that becomes evident because I'm successful in articulating why it's not sustainable and in articulating an alternative, or it becomes evident when you just come to a point where the city is facing a debt crisis and it's a question of, well, we can't borrow anymore, so now what do we cut? And those cuts are going to be very painful. That's not going to save a penny. It's supposed to save $10 million. It won't save 10 cents.
So?
It's just a ludicrous assumption. If you pick up the same amount of garbage every second week, you need twice as many trucks the second week than you do the first. I haven't seen the cost-benefit analysis. I've seen a high-level marketing pamphlet designed to convince people it's a good idea. Of course, the whole purpose of the bi-weekly garbage pickup is to drive organics into the green bin, but the green bin assessment, the approach, the planning for green bin was so flawed, it will never work. So the Municipal Act of Ontario prohibits municipalities from running deficits. That means on an annual basis, your revenues, regardless of the source, the revenues basically have to equal the outputs, your expenditures. And we do, of course, we have to do that. It's required by law. You can't run a deficit in name. However, you are allowed to borrow to fund capital projects. So, I mean, you may choose not to call it a deficit, but it's annual borrowing in order to run the city. So it's just a politeness not to call it a deficit. Of course it is. It's taken Ottawa 160 years to accumulate 800 and change million in debt. This council will double that debt in less than 48 months. There's two areas that will solve themselves if left alone eventually. They will simply come to a point where we can't borrow the money and those services will be cut because there won't be any cash. Housing and transportation. The City of Ottawa has determined that there will only be one municipal transportation carrier, that's OC Transpo, and it'll be a monopoly. So because it's such an inefficient company, the $360 million a year budget for OC Transpo requires a 50% input from the City of Ottawa. So the ratepayers, the City of Ottawa taxpayers, they have a transit surcharge on their property tax bills. And that's exactly half. It's about $170 million a year that we subsidize OC Transpo. I don't think that's a reasonable thing. It's an extraordinary amount of money. It's $1 billion every 7 years. Extraordinary amount of money to be pumping into a bus company. Why not allow competitive routes? Why not allow private industry to step in and provide some competitive routes? That's part one. Part two, and part two is far larger than part one, is housing. The City of Ottawa has determined that although it's a very honorable thing to provide housing for people who are in need, we don't provide a housing subsidy. We actually buy the land, build the houses. It would be, it's about $100,000 to build a 2-bedroom apartment, and we lease that out at $100 a month. So we have 22,300 houses, residences in Ottawa. So we've put in terms of what the City of Ottawa puts into, the biggest single envelope is social services. The biggest single part of that is the housing envelope, and our housing stock's worth over $2 billion. It's an enormous loss leader. In fact, it's worse than that. Not only do we not make enough money to cover the cost of the housing, but the housing's falling into the ground.